हाँ वरुण, हाय, हाउ आर यू? हाँ राहुल, हाय. Ashwin.
Hello, sir. Hello, hello.
Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Am I audible?
Yes, sir. Audible.
चलो ठीक है, वंडरफुल. Let people join. मैं थोड़ी देर में आता हूँ फिर.
Okay, okay.
तो देख के आप यही ऐसी तैयारी.
हेलो, क्या हाल चाल? And Professor Vinod Kumar Singh, sir. So I would like to hand over to our chairpersons to start the session.
Yeah.
Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Saroj. So good evening, everybody, and my co-chairperson, Professor Dr. Vinod Kumar Singh, Medical Superintendent and HOD Pediatrics, Nalanda Medical College, and of course, all the faculty members of IAP, like Sushil Pathak and others who are attending this virtual webinar. And without taking much time, just as Dr. Saroj has already mentioned, that we are going to have a very, very important discussion on a very important subject, and that too a very learned speaker. And you know that at times we are getting in our emergency and even on in office practice also, sometimes the baby coming with the Am I audible?
Yes,
Hello?
sir.
Yes. So,
Sir, yes, sir.
yeah. So that this subject is very, very important. As Dr. Saroj has already mentioned, at times we are getting in office practice and our emergency also in hospital and even in the our OPD setup also. And that way it's a good platform to learn new things from a very learned speaker, Dr. Neeraj Awasthi. So I invite him. And before that, I hand over this to say some few words by learned another my co-chairperson, Dr. Binod Kumar Singh, if you want to speak. Dr. Binod.
Thank you, sir. Sir, thank you, sir. So this is our pleasure and the pleasure of IIP Bihar to have the deliberation from a very eminent pediatric cardiologist of this country, who is working in one of the best centers in India, Max Saket, Delhi. And we all are facing a lot of problem, not in pediatrics age group, but also in the neonatal age group, where crisis is there. There are many situations where immediate operation, cardiothoracic surgery is essential, but and the baby is very serious. Those operations cannot be done in our state like Bihar. So how to salvage such babies and how to transfer such babies to the higher center where their operations can be done, they can be salvaged easily. So the neonatologists of this state, they are also facing a lot of problem. Now the bedside echo is available by our cardiologist. We are able to diagnose, but we are unable to treat such cases here in Patna, in Bihar, because thoracic surgery is not available. So in those conditions, how can we get time to get such babies transferred to the centers like Max Saket, so that they can be treated, they can be cured? So I would like that Dr. Avasthi also throws some light on this issue. So with your permission, I again invite Dr. Neeraj Avasthi to start his deliberation. Dr. Neeraj, please.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Dr. Vinod. At the outset, I would like to thank the IIP chapter for sponsoring such an activity, pediatric cardiac emergencies. I'm sorry because there was a delay and I had to actually come to the hospital. Right now I'm sitting in the hospital and there was some emergency. So that is the reason I will be wearing this mask, because my room is closed. I'm sitting in the corridor. The reason being that, yes, in COVID times also, we are actually a green hospital. We are having a dedicated COVID center, which is adjacent. And people are definitely coming from all over the place. And I would say that maximum transit is happening via Patna. In spite of being COVID and with the availability of now with some opening up of things, we have started getting more of emergencies rather than elective cases. Now we are getting more and more emergencies, PDA dependent circulations, and these COVID times are actually emergency times which we are having. So I would start with the pediatric cardiac emergencies, and when we talk of pediatric cardiac emergencies, we talk of basically neonates or we talk of infants and children. Whenever we talk of neonates, we talk of duct-dependent lesions. They are essentially duct-dependent lesions because that is the physiologically, duct is the only thing which is maintaining the circulation, and once duct begins to close, they tend to present early in life. They presently
You are not audible.
They present with they can present in shock or arrhythmias. The important thing is to have a fetal diagnosis. Hello, I'm because once you have a fetal diagnosis, many of these duct-dependent lesions become very easy to handle, because most of the time they can be diagnosed antenatally. And once you can diagnose them antenatally and the duct is open, it becomes very easy to ensure the transfer of patients. Am I audible still?
Say audible now.
So these are three of the examples. We have a restrictive ductus, which is leading to restrictive ductus, which restrictive ductus basically leads to hypoplastic left heart syndrome. There you have a transposition of great arteries, which is picked up antenatally. And this is tricuspid atresia VSD PS. Because of the PS, the flow is essentially dependent on PDA. For these are the three lesions which, if picked up antenatally, should always be transferred antenatally. Because essentially the flow is dependent on PDA in these cases. PDA is ensuring the flow to the pulmonary arteries. So what is this happening? What is the change of circulation which leads to all these events? No? You know that there is a four-chambered heart. There is a ductus venosus which is carrying the blood from the IVC to the right side of the heart from the mother. The open foramen ovale shunts decompresses this blood and goes to the systemic circulation. Whatever blood goes to the pulmonary artery goes to the ductus arteriosus and goes to the systemic circulation. So these circulation is in parallel. What are the changes which are happening? The ductus venosus tends to close, the PFO tends to close, and PDA tends to close. So any lesion which depends on these three lesions for activity, for survival, if it is dependent on these lesions, it is going to manifest once these lesions close. So these are essentially duct dependent lesions. That means once the PDA is open, they are going to survive. In utero, most of them are going to survive. But as the child is delivered and duct tends to close, their survival is jeopardized. There needs to be some active intervention, immediate intervention needs to be taken in newborns, and they present with emergencies. So this can be duct dependent systemic circulation. Duct dependent systemic circulation means the flow to the systemic circulation is dependent on the duct. It includes critical aortic stenosis. The left heart is pumping the blood, is pumping from the ascending aorta. It is growing. But there is ascending aorta there is a severe aortic stenosis. The blood is not able to maintain the cardiac output. So where will the systemic outflow go? So right heart which is pumping goes from the pulmonary artery, goes through the ductus and fills the systemic circulation. That is what the duct dependent systemic circulation is. In coarctation, similar thing is happening. The main artery is blocked. Since the main artery is blocked, the blood from the left ventricle is not able to meet the needs of the body for the body. So what happens? The right heart tends to contract, pump it from the pulmonary artery and fill it with the systemic circulation via the PDA. So these are duct dependent systemic circulations. Coming to duct dependent pulmonary circulations, these are a circulation where blood flow to the lungs is dependent on the PDA. Severe pulmonary stenosis, pulmonary atresia. The right heart is contracting, but the blood is not going to go to the pulmonary artery. If blood does not go to the pulmonary artery, the patient is going to be blue. So most of them, they will not be in failure, they would not be in CHF, they will present with bluish discoloration at birth. And bluish discoloration tends to increase as the child grows. So once the PDA is open, the PDA is going to shunt the systemic blood flow to the lungs and the child is able to maintain the circulation. So these are duct dependent pulmonary circulations. There is a third group of duct dependent lesions which include admixture lesion, where mixing is very important. If there is like TGA, the desaturated blood from the IVC and the SVC is coming to the right heart. The right heart is contracting. As the right heart is contracting, it is shunting to the aorta, the systemic circulation again. So the blood does not go to the pulmonary artery bed, the survival is not possible. There has to be some mixing chamber, and that mixing chamber is either a PDA or a patent foramen ovale. If this close, the patient is going to be decompensated. So duct dependent lesions are critically ill patients. They deteriorate rapidly and usually present within 48 hours because that is the time the duct closes within first 48 hours, and they need aggressive stabilization. Herein comes the role of prostaglandin. Prostaglandin is a life-saving drug. Wherever in doubt, whenever you have doubt, that could it be a duct dependent lesion, think of starting prostaglandin or on the side of prostaglandin. The dose is 0.01 to 0.4 mg per kg per minute. I'll discuss the dose in the subsequent slide. But the most important is not just the dose of the prostaglandin. The most important is support the child. Ensure the child is very well hydrated. There is no acidosis is taken care of. The child is not anemic. Anemia is any hemoglobin in a cytonic child of 10 is severe anemia. It should be around 12, 13 for the child to maintain the circulation. And of course, echocardiography whenever possible. But whenever echo is not possible and you have a doubt and the patient is desaturating or going into shock within first 48 hours of life or on the side of starting prostaglandin. Prostaglandin is available as bioglandin, L-prostin, eprostinol, as 500, all are 500 micrograms per ml. The best way to is, if you don't remember, is always diluted in 5% dextrose and 10% dextrose, depending on the blood sugars of the child. If it is hypoglycemia or something, we can make it in 10% dextrose. Or 0.05 mics per kg per minute, what I do is dissolve the full 500 ml in one ampule. Full one ampule in 500 ml, one vac. So, and if you start this at 3 ml per kg per hour, for a 3 kg child, start at 9 ml per hour, you are going to give a dose of 0.05 mics per kg per minute. Full ampule in one vac, start at 3 ml per kg per hour. That is the best. Call after 1 hour.
Dr. Neeraj, your
audible
voice
again?
is not coming properly.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I think there was some internet problem.
Yeah.
Is it audible now?
Oh, it's all. Yeah, yes, better.
So I discussed the dose of prostaglandin is dissolve the full in 500 ml for one vac. Why I say 0.05 is the best dose, because all of us fear one side effects. No, one side effect is apnea. Do we need to intubate the child when we start prostaglandin? No, we do not need to intubate the child when we start prostaglandin. The incidence of apnea is around 12%. Yes, the incidence of apnea increases as the dose increases beyond 0.05 mics per kg per minute. So if you are starting at this dose and it is maximum beyond 0.1 mics. So if you are starting at this dose, it is very less likely that the patient is going to be apneic. This is the best dose to actually transfer the patient. The other incidences, of course, flushing, CNS events, twitching, hypoglycemia. That is the reason we always start in 5% dextrose. But whenever there are other events you feel, you can decrease the dose by say 20% and or expand the dose by at 10 ml per kg. If there are CNS events, you can decrease it by 50%. This is the general rule. Start at 0.05 mics per kg. I think this is the best way to transfer a child. Maintain this. The prostaglandin is not eternal. You have to, supportive care is equally important. The temperature maintenance, the acidosis, the anemia, these are equally important things which needs to be taken care of. When we talk of blood-dependent systemic blood flow, these are generally patients who present in shock. The femorals are weak. They might have mild cyanosis. They generally include critical coarctations, critical valvular stenosis, or a hypoplastic left lead. Like, take example of this 33-day-old child who presented with respiratory distress, was in CHF, had severe coarctation with ventricular dysfunction. What do we do with this child? The best is start a prostaglandin, and remember they can progress very fast. This is one of the cases which we published in Annals of Pediatric Cardiology. This patient was totally asymptomatic. There you see the previous photo, which the arch is quite well, and within 2 to 3 visits, he went into severe coarctation. The reason being the duct closed. So you have to act very fast. And what is the treatment for these patients? If the patient is stable, hemodynamically stable, rest of the parameters are okay, the treatment of choice is surgical. But if the patient is unstable, we can balloon the child, palliate the child till we go for a surgical correction. The other option is, of course, for a 20-day-old child. Other example is of this 20-day-old child who presented with fluid feeding, with critical aortic stenosis and severe ventricular dysfunction. And the treatment of choice for aortic stenosis is stabilize this patient, ensure that it can be transferred to a suitable center, and can be, once done, a balloon aortic valvotomy can be offered to these patients. Like for this particular child, you see a severe aortic stenosis, and this pen underwent a balloon aortic valvotomy. Surgical valvotomy is an alternative. The treatment of first choice is always balloon aortic valvotomy. This is another example of a severe coarctation kid who underwent ballooning because the patient was very sick. The systemic parameters were deranged. The RFTs were deranged. In these cases, we do balloon it, buy some time, and electively operate at a later date. Coming to duct-dependent pulmonary blood flow, where the pulmonary blood flow is dependent on the ductus. These generally present with very deep cyanosis. The patient may be absolutely okay, but suddenly begin to begin blue, and the patient is or become tachypneic. They are generally very blue babies. Example, severe pulmonary stenosis or critical pulmonary stenosis, and the treatment of them is urgent balloon pulmonary valvotomy. But when the patient awaits balloon valvotomy, If the duct is open, this patient is not going to get decompensated. Ensure the adequate temperature is there, ensure adequate hydration is there, and ensure when you transfer to a center, always err on the side of starting a prostaglandin whenever in doubt. Of course, when you have an echocardiography, you can always do an echo and then consider a transfer. This is another case of a severe cyanosis, single second heart sound, VSD pulmonary atresia, duct dependent lesion. In this particular lesion, we just stented the ductus, we stented the PDA, and the patient got cured. This is an interesting case. If you see that this is from a Kathmandu, and this was a 2-day-old child where I went for a workshop. I am lucky to have been associated with Patna in Bihar for almost 4 or 5 years now. No, even more, I think. And we actually started doing many cases in IGMC. We did it in Ford. Then we did it in Hart and many other centers. And we were doing regular workshops in the various parts of the country. It is one of these workshops where we went to Kathmandu and we went for a ASD device workshop. And the patient, 2-day-old child, came in front of us and crashed. Literally crashed. I told them, what are you going to do for this child? They said, nothing, because we will send for surgery and most of them don't survive in surgery. We immediately took this child onto the table, did a PDA stenting. This is the first PDA stenting of Nepal. And this patient, next time we went elective total correction at a later date and was doing wonderfully well. And the learning curve, in the same workshop, we delivered almost 15 or 20 PDA stents. And PDA stent is such a wonderful procedure. Even adult cardiologist, once he learns, because it's a coronary stent which needs to be put. And they're doing such a wonderful job now salvaging these patients. So PDA stent has come as a boon. PDA stent is something which has remarkably improved the survival of these patients. What we are doing is, instead of PDA, prostaglandin opening the PDA, we just stent the PDA and do the elective procedure when they grown up. Maybe this particular patient which you are seeing is a patient from actually Gorakhpur, and the patient is now 11 months old and is going to underwent a total correction nicely. Now, is PDA stenting the only option? No. If the patient is extremely small, we now are doing desaturation. This is one of the child who presented from Patna, and this was actually the initial of COVID times. 11 days, 1.6 kg, severely desaturated. We ballooned this patient. Patient is still doing wonderfully well. There is no urgency to operate this patient. We can easily wait for a tetralogy since the saturations are good till he grows up. This was another of RVOT stenting. There you see the injection being given in the ventricle, and there you see a stent within the RVOT. It was a 3 months, 3 kg child who came in COVID times. There you see when the anesthetist standing in the PPE kit with a saturation of 55%. And once we stented this child is doing wonderfully well, and there's no urgency for surgery. This happens to be the first case of RVOT stenting in a case of tricuspid atresia, which has been published this month in Catheter Cardiovascular Interventions. Is it the first case of RVOT stenting? No. We have done many cases of RVOT stenting. It is an alternative to PDA stenting. But yes, this is the first case in tricuspid atresia, and that is the specialty of this case. And this was again done in COVID times. And as I'm telling you, these COVID times, most of the bulk of patients which we are getting are emergencies. Electives are not really coming forward. But yes, now we are a green hospital. We are doing all the elective cases. There are times which was all closed, and we were getting absolute emergencies. And these are the same of the cases like this. TGA. The patient is extremely blue. You see the X-ray, there is a narrow pedicle, and the flow is more towards the upper part of the lungs. Always are on the side of a prostaglandin, as we have discussed. Start prostaglandin and stabilize this patient. We can do a septostomy for stabilization and do arterial switch at a later date. This is a septostomy being done. And same is the story for obstructed TAPVC. It is always a surgical emergency. But yes, we have stented a few obstructed veins for them to grow up, and they would do wonderfully post-operatively, as is example. This is one of the obstructed TAPVC who was very unfit for a surgery, had a 3-day-old, had an intracranial bleed, was on IPPV. Of course, to put on a bypass and total correction was very not a good case to do. We stented this ductus, extubated this patient. 3 months later, we did a TAPVC total correction. The patient is doing now wonderfully well. And if you see, this date must be there. This patient is almost a year old now. So the neonates who present with congestive heart failure, either present with myocardial dysfunction or a structural heart disease. Structural heart disease, they generally present when around 4 to 6 weeks of age, when the PA pressure starts to begin down and the flow to the lungs increases. They generally present around 4 weeks, 6 weeks. They include AVSD, AP window, truncus, VSDs, or recurrent lesions. And structural heart defects involve stabilization for CHF and, of course, early surgery for lesions such as L-kappa. Now, whenever you have a neonate presenting with CHF and you present a myocardial dysfunction, what will be the setting? When will you suspect that this could be a myocardial dysfunction, which is actually myocardial dysfunction which is happening? ECG is a very, very good example. And look at this setting. If the mother is severely hypocalcemic, hypocalcemia is a treatable cause of ventricular dysfunction. ECG would give you clues of ischemia, T-wave inversion in 2-3 AVF, like in this particular case. And once L-kappa is treated, is excellent results. We recently had L-kappa which was being treated as dilated cardiomyopathies. Many of these get treated as dilated cardiomyopathies. In fact, they turned out to be L-kappa. And once you treat them, the coronaries become normal. The main prognostic feature is pick them up early, because once the severe dysfunction sets in, the recovery becomes slightly slow. And also if the AV valve regurgitation is significant, the recovery becomes slightly slow. Same is this story for hypocalcemia. Once you treat the hypocalcemia, the things gets treated. Pompe's disease is, of course, again, ECG would give you a clue. Short PR interval, long QRS complexes, that will give you the clue. Coming to infants and children, those who present with cyanotic spells, most of them would carry a diagnosis of ECO that yes, there is a cyanotic physiology. Whenever in what is a cyanotic spell? The patient will become deeply blue, will become tachypneic, will become irritable, become unconscious. What to do? Not to poke the child. Always start oxygen, put in a knee chest position, take some time. There is no urgency to poke the child because it further exacerbates the spell. Once you get an IV access, once the child is reasonably comfortable, take an IV access. Drug of choice is morphine. Yes, nowadays our morphine is in lock and key. Otherwise, it's a very good drug. But short of morphine, the first drug to treat would be volume. 20 ml per kg, 40 ml per kg, go up to 60 ml per kg. Give volume, because once you give volume, everything tends to relax. The antigrade flow tends to improve. And of course, acidosis and rest of things settle. Once you take an IV access, always send a VBG. Look for the presence of anemia, because that is the important cause of precipitating cause of a spell. Whenever the hemoglobin is less than 10, severe anemia, the anemia has to be around, the hemoglobin has to be around 12 to 15 in these particular cyanotic babies, because that is the only thing which is maintaining the cardiac output. Child is very blue, the oxygen capacity is low. So more hemoglobin, more trucks are required to deliver it to the peripheries, because the trucks are half empty. They are carrying very low oxygen. So more trucks are there to carry the oxygen to the peripheries. The trucks are these RBCs. More better is for the child. So we need a hemoglobin around 12 to 15 for this child for appropriate maintenance. We can start beta blocker. We can start, and if it is persistent, we can intubate the child. Rest of the diseases, these are something which we see routinely: shunt lesions, obstructed lesions. They are essentially CHF management, which we can discuss subsequently, dilated cardiomyopathies. But one of the important lesion is this. Always remember, dilated cardiomyopathies are not always dilated cardiomyopathies. We are running a cardiomyopathy clinic in Max Hospital, Saket for last 10 years. And remember, this is one of the example where this was a child who was being followed up as aortoarthritis. Look at the descending aorta, which was severely narrow. And it was actually aortoarthritis which was leading to dilated cardiomyopathies. It was never a dilated cardiomyopathy. This was again a case which is done in these COVID times. This is a 3-year-old child, came from actually, if I remember, is from Darbhanga. Yeah, the patient is from Darbhanga, and the patient was being followed up as a dilated cardiomyopathy, and and was having renal artery stenosis. We stented the descending aorta, opened up both the renal arteries. The blood pressure of the child improved, and so the ventricular dysfunction. Acute rheumatic fever, it's very rampant in our part of the population. In Bihar, we see each visit, we see so many of the patients with the high ASO titers. Whenever the patient is having high ASO titers, is having a features, Jones criteria, which is there, it's always a good idea to get the echo. The presence of pericardial effusions, the presence of AV valve regurgitation add to the diagnostic challenge, and always err on the side of treating a rheumatic fever because it tends to have a better long-term prognosis. Of course, whenever there is significant pericardial effusion, we might actually tap it. Infective endocarditis treatment, we all know, but cardiac arrhythmias is the one topic which I would like to touch in the end. We are really all fear for it, but whenever the patient is hemodynamic unstable, always go for a cardioversion. If the patient is stable, you can always go for an adenosine 0.05 mg per kg, and once he responds, we can always start metoprolol as a long-term outcome. Other end of the spectrum of arrhythmia is a heart block. Always better to pick it up antenatally. This was a child which was picked antenatally. We did a pacing in 1.5 kg child. We went as the child gained weight, we implanted an elective pacemaker in this child. So we can actually implant an elective pacemaker if the child has got good weight, because pacemaker needs some space. But if there is no space, we just put a TPI and wait. The indication of PPI is heart rate less than 55, symptomatic, ventricular dysfunction, white QRS, or a prolonged QT. In the end, I would like to give a few take-home messages. Is most congenital cardiac lesions are amenable to surgery or catheter interventions. It is very important that timely evaluation and intervention is crucial for long-term results. But it is not just the intervention which is important. It is the thing which is done by all of us together. That means stabilizing the patient, having a high index of suspicion, ensuring the anemia and the associated factors are taken care of, and always err on the side of starting early, a prostaglandin or if you feel it's a spell, always err on the side of giving fluids that will help the child in the long run. This is our team, anesthesia, our adult electrophysiology team, and all of them working in corona times together, who are done almost handling almost emergencies always every second or third day. And I would actually to take this opportunity to thank all of you on their behalf, and thank IAP for giving this opportunity to interact with you. I'm open to questions, whatever this. Dr. Saroj, anything, any questions if they are there?
Thank you, Dr. Awasthi, Majoraj Awasthi, for your brilliant scientific deliberation. I think it was a wonderful talk by you, and you have given, and really we are amazed that very, very small, tiny babies could be saved under repair. And really, I mean, so many patients from our state going to that center. So that's a real, very satisfying for all of us. So Dr. Binod, Dr. Binod Singh, please, if any questions or any comments by you?
Is there any question or comments from the audience first? Hello. So can you hear me, sir?
Yes, I can hear you, sir. Dr. Binod,
Yes.
it's actually wonderful. I have been seeing few of your patients,
Yes.
and I could really not interact. I could see you today after a long time. It's wonderful seeing you, sir.
Okay, sir. This is you had a very great deliberation on the emergency aspect of the cardiac cases. So one thing I would like to ask you, so how long we can keep a patient on prostaglandin once the patient is having drug dependent some lesion and the patient is trying to buy some time. So how long we can keep it?
Sir, this is a very good question actually. What used to happen is around 18 years, 19 years back when we started off, we were not the PDA stenting is very new. Very new, I would say it started off 2-3 years back. But before that, we were always keeping this patient on prostaglandin. But remember, prostaglandin has got its side effects. We don't like prostaglandin personally. As soon as the patient comes in the center, we try to stop the prostaglandin. It tends to not only cause apnea, CNS events, there are other events. It tends to retain a lot of fluid. The patient tends to retain a lot of fluid and become puffy. So, few years back, the only option, we used to keep it for months. Preterm delivery is there. It's a drug dependent lesion, 1 kg. The patient used to stay in for 1 month and on prostaglandin, and then we used to take it from surgery. But with the availability of a PDA stent, now we keep it as more of a transfer agent, because more prostaglandin means more fluid retention, more edema, and all these things cause problem when we are doing a procedure. So prostaglandin, we can keep it for quite some time. We were used to keep for 1.5 months earlier, but nowadays the dictum is, if you are erring on the side of prostaglandin, this patient needs supportive care in a tertiary center and should be electively transferred to a tertiary care center as soon as possible.
The another question from my side is, if the patient is having synaptic congenital heart disease with shock and he is not improving, so we recommend the use of prostaglandin even if we don't have the echocardiographic diagnosis of PDA. So how far it is justified?
Yes, sir. Again, a very important question. Whenever in doubt, you have a patient who was very healthy, and within 48 hours, the patient is deteriorating. Whenever in doubt, is always a good idea to err on the side of prostaglandin, because prostaglandin is not going to cause any harm. And whenever erring on the side of prostaglandin, just ensure that you get an echocardiography done whenever possible in next 24, 48, 76 hours, whenever it is possible to get one echocardiography done, because we are considering a possibility of drug-dependent lesion. But if the child is improving and you feel, no, this was never a drug-dependent lesion, I just started it empirically, there is no harm. It's not going to cause much harm. The risk of apnea is just 12%. Hypotension, yes, it causes. If it causes hypotension, the dose is maybe very high, 0.05 mics per kg per minute. The risk of hypotension is also very low. If there is causing hypotension, does just decrease the dose by 50%. So it's always a good idea to err on the side of prostaglandin.
Sir, the another question I would like to ask you. So suppose there is some newborn with large PDA, and we have tried, nowadays we say that this even paracetamol is almost equally effective as is this ibuprofen or endomethacin. So you have used paracetamol, this size is not regressing. Even if you have used ibuprofen subsequently, the size is not regressing. So is there any size, or how many times you can use this ibuprofen or endomethacin in a case of PDA to do medical closure, and when to go for this PDA closure by device?
Yes, sir. It's a very common question, and it's a very usual, very important practical question. Reflects on your experience. Clearly, sir. First PDA, if PDA is there, it's a preterm PDA. Always a medical management, as you have said. Drug of choice as of today is paracetamol. PCM, first course 15 mg per kg, second course 15 mg per kg. Not responding, Brufen you can try. If we are comfortable and if we are able to wean off the child, whatever the size of the PDA, we can consider adding a small dose of Lasix in OD doses and see. Our attempt is to buy time. But yes, if the PDA is still very large and the patient is symptomatic because of this PDA, we can go ahead and close this PDA. Nowadays, I mean, say for last 3 years, we are even closing this PDA with a device. We have the availability of a preterm PDA device. We have closed 700 grammars, 900 grammars. Now that the child has become 3 years, that was the first device which we did in India. Now Piccolo device is available. Piccolo is exclusively meant for a preterm PDA. I'm not saying having sex, so I'm not saying that is the first choice. That is the device only if we are stuck. The patient is on oxygen dependent, is not able to wean off in spite of decongestants, and don't go by the size of the PDA. Even if by decongestants, whatever the size of the PDA, we are able to wean off the patient by time, that is the best. But yes, if we are not able to wean off, we have tried our medical management, decongestants, and not able to wean off, then we consider either clipping the PDA surgically or using a PDA device, irrespective of the size of the PDA. In fact, you will find certain PDAs who are huge, but because of the decongestants, they by time they were maintaining reasonably well. Well, weight gain may be slow. That is the reason. That is the other indication which we go intervene. But otherwise, if we can buy that preterm period, which is a very labile period, we would not like to intervene unless we are stuck. The patient is oxygen dependent, is ventilated, is not able to come off. That will be the indication to medically, paracetamol, PCM, Brufen. Yes, if you can go for the indomethacin, you can try it. But personally, I would say that these are the three modalities which we start before we go for a interventional closure.
So thank you, Dr. Mufti sir,
Sir.
for your excellent interaction. And if there
Sir,
is there any question from the audience?
Yes, sir. I have one question, sir. Dr. Sushil Pathak, I'm asking
Yeah.
sir one question.
Yeah.
Sir, sir, regarding this neonatal shock, just I want to know ki in pediatrics we have changed from dopamine to adrenaline. So, what is your opinion regarding start with the dopamine or adrenaline? And second, what are the special indication where we can start milrinone or dobutamine? Means many times we have to. What is the priority of getting this milrinone over dobutamine in
It's
terms
a
of
very
neonatal?
relevant question, and definitely we had a specific talk which was on congestive heart failure recently. I think I will interact more. We can have a sequence being associated with the IAP pediatric cardiology chapter. We are having a sequence of we'll be having a sequence of talks, and one of them is on CHF. It's a very important question. Dopamine nowadays is not a drug of choice because of its so many side effects which are there. We have to empirically see our patient, whether it's a shock, which requires SVR which is low or SVR which is high. If you think you are really is dilated, in particular case, adrenaline would be a first choice. But if you have a severe PH which is there, pulmonary artery pressures are very, very high, then patient is going into shock. That means the blood is not able to transverse the right atrium, the right ventricle into the lungs, and then going to the left side and then maintain a cardiac output. You have to have vasodilate this patient. That means the milrinone would be the first choice. Start low dose of milrinone, especially PPHN kids now. Start low dose of milrinone. Whenever you start milrinone, the problem happens is hypotension, because there is no volume in the body. Volume is not able to go to the body because lung pressures are high. So always ensure the patient is well hydrated. Start milrinone and then start a low dose of adrenaline. And by that time, till the lungs relax over next 2 to 3 weeks or next few days, and you will gradually feel the lungs start relaxing. You can always go on your dose of dopamine. Can be started in renal doses if required. Otherwise, dopamine is generally not considered nowadays a drug of choice. I hope that answers. Otherwise, I'll be anything. I will be. I'll be happy to interact personally also.
Dr. Neeraj, many books says that there is no dopamine. No, you're saying renal dose. So is it there?
You're absolutely. Dopamine was having so many side effects that that because of the arrhythmias and all those events, it is no longer considered a very good drug. For this. But yes, whenever we have a renal shutdown, considering a low dose dopamine can be tried. This was from the consensus which we recently had in one of the meetings. But I totally agree with you. In our personal nurseries and nurseries, we have a few nurseries which are associated with us. Dopamine is not considered a drug. Actually, it is not kept inside the drug. We do not use dopamine routine.
Okay.
It is always adrenaline for a systemic vasoconstriction and the milrinone for vasodilatation and a dobutamine.
Okay, Dr. Neeraj, I have one more question. Many times with this antenatal diagnosis of antenatal echo, many complex congenital heart disease came to the parents come to know it is there. So when most of them they come ask for opinion regarding termination of pregnancy. So medico-legally, can you tell what are the condition, how we approach, what will be our approach for antenatal diagnosis of complex congenital heart disease?
It's for antenatal diagnosis, the best way to do an antenatal echocardiography is before 20 weeks, because that is the time we can actually take a decision in this country. Beyond 20 weeks, it becomes very difficult to decide. The rule is always we explain to the patients the outcome. What are the various outcomes of the disease? We generally don't use the word termination. But yes, for a complex congenital heart disease, single ventricle pathway with multiple surgeries involved, most of the they would opt for a surgical termination, and which is justified, which is multiple surgeries. For a single stage total corrections, tetralogies, TGAs, with such a wonderful results, it may not be a good idea, because tetralogies, TGAs ever got a normal lifespan once they got to get operated. For a univentricular heart, single chamber, hypoplastic left heart, hypoplastic right heart syndromes, it is a very bad subset, and termination is likely. Having said so, we have interventions now for 3 subset of patients. One is severe pulmonary stenosis, one is severe aortic stenosis, and one is restrictive intraatrial communications. Why these 3 subsets? Because if we treat pulmonary stenosis, hypoplastic right heart does not happen. If we treat aortic stenosis, hypoplastic left heart does not happen. And if we opened up the BAV, the capabilities there, we are already doing fetal interventions. And yes, these 3 lesions can also be tackled early, and these complications can be avoided. But having said so, mote taur pe if you really see, single ventricles should be avoided. Single ventricles termination, I mean, that is justified.
Thank you. Thank
Dr.
you.
Pathak, I would like to say that if you have got the complex congenital heart disease in the fetus of any mother, so
Yes, sir.
don't say him to stay at Patna.
Okay,
They
sir.
should be delivered at a center where the other facilities of cardiac resuscitation and the immediate intervention of surgery is required.
Absolutely,
So
sir.
maybe
As Dr. Vinod is
Mumbai or
saying, best
Delhi
transfer
or
is in
one
utero.
of the metropolitans. So
Absolutely.
don't keep
Right,
such
sir.
mothers in Patna, because after delivery they are not going to be salvaged by surgery, at least in Patna. So
Right,
that
sir.
was my point of view.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right, sir.
That's important.
So any more questions? Sir, Dr. A.K. Jaiswal, sir, if there are no questions,
Yeah.
because of the excellent presentation of Dr. Avasthi, we should close now or
Yeah.
hand over to the moderator, Dr. Saroj Kumar.
Yeah.
Yes,
We can
thank you, sir. As there is no question, I think we should close the session. But before that, I would like to request Mr. Aswani to kindly propose the vote of thanks. Mr. Aswani.
Thank you, Dr. Neeraj Awasthi, sir, for nice presentation. Thank you, Dr. Saroj, sir, for coordination and for support to arrange this session. And also very special thanks to Dr. A.K. Jaiswal, sir, Dr. Vinod Kumar Singh, sir, and all participants to join this session and sharing their views and questions. Thanks, Doctor.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Dr.